She looked at me like she already knew what I was about to say, and maybe that's why I didn't say it. The air between us was too still, too heavy with something neither of us wanted to name. She stood by the open window, half lit by the soft glow of evening, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee mug as if the warmth might anchor her there. The street outside was quiet, just the hum of tires on wet asphalt and the faraway bark of a dog. Inside, every sound seemed louder, the slow tick of the clock, her soft exhale, my heartbeat refusing to calm down. I shouldn't have been there that late. But she hadn't told me to leave, and I hadn't found the strength to go. "Your tea's gone cold," I said. She smiled faintly, the kind that hides more than it shows. "So has yours." I hadn't even noticed. She was older, yes, but not in the way people meant when they said the word. There was something about her that made time seem irrelevant, the way she held herself, the way her silences filled the room more completely than any conversation. When she laughed, it wasn't loud, it was low and soft, like a secret. And when she looked at me, really looked, it felt like standing too close to the edge of something beautiful and dangerous. I tried to pretend I was calm, that I wasn't watching the curve of her hand as she set her cup down, or the way a strand of hair slipped loose from behind her ear. "You always stare like that," she murmured without looking at me. I blinked. "Like what?" "Like you're trying to remember something that hasn't happened yet." Her words lingered, quiet but sharp. I wanted to tell her she wasn't wrong. That I kept catching glimpses of moments that didn't exist, her hand brushing mine, her voice saying my name in the dark. But instead I said nothing. My throat felt tight, my thoughts clumsy. She turned slightly, and the scent of her perfume, faint jasmine, something clean and warm, reached me. It made my chest ache. "Do you ever get tired of holding everything in?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes lifted to meet mine, calm but tired. "You say that like it's a choice." The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. The space between us, a few steps, maybe less, felt like a line neither of us wanted to cross, yet both of us kept circling. I took a slow breath, half a laugh caught in it. "You make it sound impossible." She tilted her head. "Isn't it?" For a moment, I thought she might step closer. The world shrank to the sound of her voice, the faint rustle of her sleeve. My hand moved, without thought, without courage, until my fingers brushed hers. Just a touch. Just enough to know she was real. She didn't pull away. Instead, she looked down at where our hands met, her skin pale against mine, and then back up at me. There was something raw in her eyes, something that felt like both warning and invitation. And then, like the world had been waiting for that exact second to intervene, the front door creaked open. Her breath hitched. A man's voice called from the hallway, casual, unknowing. "You still up?" She stepped back, so fast it almost broke the air between us, and the distance felt unbearable. I didn't turn toward the sound. I just stood there, staring at the empty space where her hand had been. For the first time, I understood what it meant when she said, "Not everything that feels right is meant to happen." But God, it already had. I didn't see her for 3 days after that night. 3 days where I replayed every second, the brush of her hand, the tremor in her voice when the door opened, the way she looked at me like she was already saying goodbye. When I finally did see her again, it wasn't planned. I dropped by to return a book she'd lent me, a collection of essays she said might help me understand people better. She opened the door slowly, surprise flickering across her face, then softening into something I couldn't read. "You remembered," she said quietly, taking the book from my hand. "I wasn't sure if I should." Her lips curved, but not into a smile. "You never are." I followed her inside. The same quiet warmth filled her apartment, soft lamplight, faint music humming from another room. Everything smelled faintly of her, jasmine and tea leaves and something faintly citrus. She set the book on the table, her fingers resting there a moment too long. You didn't have to come. I know. She turned toward me, her expression careful. You're making this harder. I swallowed. What am I making harder? She didn't answer. Just walked to the kitchen, reached for the kettle, and filled it with water. The sound of it running was too loud, too normal for what hung between us. I leaned against the doorway, watching her shoulders move beneath the thin fabric of her blouse. She carried herself with that same quiet grace, the kind that made me forget how young I was, how much I didn't know. You never talk about him, I said finally. She paused, her hand hovering over the stove. Who? The man who came in that night. Something in her posture changed, not a flinch, exactly, but a subtle tightening, like the air around her had turned colder. He's a part of my past I haven't quite managed to leave behind. Her tone was even, but her eyes betrayed her, that flicker of regret that made my chest ache. I wanted to ask more, but the look she gave me stopped me. Instead, I said, You deserve better. Her laugh was soft, almost sad. Don't say things like that. Why not? Because you mean them. The kettle began to whistle, a sharp sound breaking through the heaviness. She turned away, pouring water into 2 cups, her hand steady despite the tremor in her breath. When she handed me my cup, her fingers brushed mine again, and this time, she didn't pull away. Her touch lingered, just enough for me to feel the pulse beneath her skin. I should have said something, anything, but the silence between us felt alive, trembling with everything we weren't saying. She took a small step closer. I could feel the warmth of her body, the faint rhythm of her breathing. Her voice was barely a whisper. This, whatever this is, it can't go anywhere. I nodded, but I didn't move. Her hand stayed where it was, fingers still resting lightly against mine. And then she said, quieter still, But I don't want it to stop. She hadn't meant to let me in. I could tell by the way she lingered at the door, her fingers gripping the edge as if she might close it again. But she didn't. The rain had followed me, soft, silver drizzle clinging to my jacket, dampening my hair. She took one look at me and sighed, stepping aside. You'll catch a cold if you stand out there. Her apartment was dim, a single lamp on the coffee table spilling golden light across the room. The faint scent of lavender hung in the air, warm and too familiar. I shrugged out of my jacket, trying not to drip everywhere. She disappeared for a moment, returning with a towel. Here, she said, reaching up to dab at my hair before I could take it. Her touch was careful, almost maternal, and yet it wasn't. Each brush of the towel against my skin felt too intimate, too deliberate. I wanted to move, to laugh, to do something that would make it less heavy. But I couldn't. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. I know. Her hand stilled. Then why? I didn't come to talk. That made her freeze. The towel slipped from her fingers and landed between us, forgotten. The silence that followed was unbearable. Her eyes locked on mine, her breath uneven. The rain outside filled the space we couldn't fill with words. Then, the sharp buzz of her phone on the counter broke the spell. She turned, hesitating before picking it up. Her voice when she answered was lighter than it should have been. Hey. No, I'm just home. Quiet night. Her eyes flicked toward me as she spoke, that unspoken plea for silence. Whoever was on the other end said something that made her smile faintly, though her hand trembled where it rested on the counter. When she hung up, the quiet returned, heavier now, like it had seen too much. Was that him? I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes met mine. It doesn't matter who it was. But it did, and she knew I knew that. I stepped closer, each movement slow, deliberate. She didn't back away this time. Her pulse fluttered at the base of her throat, visible in the soft light. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, the closeness we both kept pretending we could handle. "You're shaking," I murmured. "It's just cold." "It's not." Her breath caught, a small sound that pulled me closer without thought. For a moment, everything else fell away, the rain, the guilt, the years that separated us. My hand lifted, fingers brushing her cheek. She closed her eyes. And then, the sharp knock at the door. We froze. A voice, her friend's, called from the hallway. "You home? I brought that file you wanted." She stepped back fast, her hand finding mine for just an instant before she let go. Her whisper was a quiet rush of panic. "You can't be here." I nodded, heart hammering, and ducked into the hallway as she went to answer. I could hear her laughing, the same careful, practiced laugh that always meant she was hiding something. And when I slipped out the back door minutes later, the rain colder now, I could still feel the warmth of her hand in mine. We were unraveling, not with distance, but with every attempt to resist. The next time I saw her, she didn't speak right away. We stood in her doorway again, the place where all our hesitations lived. The night pressed close behind me, heavy with unsaid things. She wore a simple gray sweater, sleeves pushed up, her hair loose for once. She looked unguarded. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "I know," I answered, because it was true every time. She exhaled through her nose, tired but not angry. "Then why do you keep showing up?" I didn't have an answer that would make sense to either of us. I just looked at her, at the small line between her brows, the faint shadow of loneliness in her eyes, and said quietly, "Because I can't not." That broke something. Her hand went to the door frame, as if she needed it to stand steady. The silence stretched between us until it felt like a third person in the room. She turned away. "You don't understand what this would cost me." "Then tell me," I said. She hesitated, then whispered, "My reputation. My peace." The small, fragile quiet I'd built since he left. There it was, the crack in her calm. I stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder through the fabric. "You think I'd ruin that?" Her voice shook. "I think you already are." For a long second, either of us moved. Then she looked up, really looked at me. There was no pretense this time, no hiding behind the careful distance she always kept. I reached up without thinking and brushed a strand of hair from her face. My fingers lingered near her cheek, the skin soft, cool. She didn't pull away. "You're trembling," I said quietly. "So are you." Her words were barely audible. She turned her head slightly, and the movement brought us even closer, the distance between us now a single breath. Her scent was all around me, light and warm, and I swear the air itself seemed to thicken with every heartbeat. "I keep trying to stop thinking about you," I said, the words spilling out before I could catch them. "But every time you walk away," she cut me off, voice breaking. "Don't." I lose my balance. Her eyes closed like the sound hurt. And then she reached for me. Not to pull me in, not yet, but to hold my wrist, her thumb tracing the vein there, as if she needed proof that I was real. Her forehead rested against mine. The world narrowed to that single point of contact, breath against breath, heartbeat against heartbeat. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "I know. You're too young." "Maybe," I said. "But that doesn't make it less real." Her lips parted, not quite a word, not quite a breath. Her fingers slid from my wrist to the back of my neck, her touch trembling. I thought she might kiss me then. I swear she almost did. But then, a sharp noise shattered the stillness. Her phone, vibrating across the table. We both froze, still locked in that fragile, breathless closeness. She looked at me, eyes glassy, voice trembling. "If I answer that, we'll go back to pretending. And if you don't?" Her silence was the only answer I needed. She didn't answer the call. Not right away. The phone stopped vibrating after the third buzz, and for a few seconds neither of us breathed. She stood frozen, one hand still at her side, the other resting on my chest like she hadn't realized it was there. When she finally stepped back, her voice was thin, careful. "I shouldn't have, don't," I said softly. "Don't finish that." But she did. "I shouldn't have let you get this close." She turned away before I could reply, walking toward the window, pulling the curtain back like she needed air. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the street shimmered wet and quiet. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she picked it up, and her entire body stiffened. I heard the voice faintly through the speaker before she answered. "You left your office unlocked again, Claire. Someone might think you're distracted." It was a man's voice, older, calm, knowing. Her boss. She glanced at me over her shoulder, guilt flickering across her face before she ended the call. "Who was that?" I asked. She hesitated too long. "Just work, Claire." Her name left my mouth differently this time, sharper, heavier. She finally turned around, and I could see it in her eyes, the fear, the exhaustion, the secret she'd been holding back. "He knows," she whispered. "He saw us that night, when you were leaving." My stomach dropped. "How much?" "I don't know. Enough to make me feel like I'm standing on glass." I took a step forward, but she shook her head, trembling. "If he reports it, if anyone finds out, I could lose everything." "Then tell me what you want me to do," I said. "I want you to stop looking at me like that," she said, but her voice broke halfway through. "I can't." Her hand went to her mouth, like she could swallow the sound that came out, half laugh, half sob. "You don't understand. You think this is just about age, or guilt, or what people will say. It's not. It's about me finally feeling something I thought was gone." The words hung between us, raw and shaking. I reached for her, not to pull her in, but just to steady her, to show her I was still there. My hand brushed her arm, and she trembled like my touch burned. "Say it again," I whispered. She didn't. Instead, she stepped closer, her forehead nearly touching my collarbone. Her voice was low, almost desperate. "I hate that I want this. That I want you." I swallowed hard, my hand finding the small of her back without thought. "Then stop pretending you don't." Her breath hitched, sharp, shaky, and she looked up at me, eyes bright with something fierce and terrified all at once. "You don't know what you're asking for," she whispered. "I do." She hesitated, one heartbeat, two, and then she moved. Not away this time. Past me, toward the hallway, her hand brushing against mine as she passed. "I need to decide," she said softly, her back to me, "before someone else does it for me." And just like that, she was gone down the hall, leaving her scent, her warmth, her words hanging in the air like smoke. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about wanting her. It was about losing her, and knowing I might have already started to. The next morning came heavy with silence. I hadn't slept, not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her walking down that hallway, her shoulders trembling, her voice caught between fear and wanting. I told myself to leave it alone, to let her decide. But when the rain started again, that soft, familiar rhythm tapping against my window, I found myself outside her building before I even realized I'd driven there. She opened the door like she'd been expecting me. No words, no hesitation. Just a quiet breath that seemed to say, so we're doing this. Her apartment felt different this time. Dimmer. The curtains half drawn. A mug sat untouched on the table, the tea gone cold. You shouldn't be here, she said, softer this time, almost pleading. I know. Her eyes searched mine. You're making it impossible to think straight. Maybe that's the point. A flicker, part anger, part longing, crossed her face. You think this is easy for me? That I can just forget everything that could fall apart? No, I said quietly. But I think you're tired of pretending it hasn't already started to. She turned away, her hands gripping the back of a chair. Her knuckles were white. You have no idea what people will say. I don't care. I do, she snapped, then closed her eyes, breath shaking. Because when this ends, and it will, I'll be the one everyone blames. The older woman who should have known better. Her words hit hard, but I didn't step back. Instead, I walked closer, slow, careful, until I was right behind her. You think I came here to make your life harder, I said. But I just can't watch you keep hiding. She turned then, suddenly, and we were face to face, so close our breaths tangled in the narrow space between us. Her eyes were shining, her pulse fluttering at her throat. Don't say it, she whispered. I have to. Don't, I love you. The words came out low, steady, but the moment they left me, the air changed. She stared at me like I'd torn something open. You don't even know what that means yet, she said, voice breaking. You'll wake up one day and wonder what you saw in me. I shook my head. I already know. It's the way you look away when you want to stay. The way you make silence feel like a heartbeat. That's what I see. Her hand lifted, hesitant, and brushed the side of my face. Her thumb lingered at the corner of my mouth, trembling. Every time you walk away, I whispered, I lose my balance. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't step back. Instead, she leaned in, just enough for her forehead to rest against mine. This won't be easy, she said. I don't want easy. The space between us disappeared. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but the moment before one. That thin, fragile breath where everything had already been decided. And in that stillness, we both understood, whatever came next, either of us could go back. Morning crept in quietly, pale sunlight slipping through the half-closed curtains. The air still carried the faint scent of rain and something softer, something that lingered between us. She sat on the couch, knees drawn up, a blanket draped loosely around her shoulders. I made coffee in the small kitchen, the sound of it filling the silence that, for once, didn't feel heavy. When I handed her the mug, she smiled, small, tired, but real. You stayed. I didn't want to leave. Her eyes searched mine. You always say that like it's easy. It's not, I said. But it's honest. For a moment, she just looked at me, like she was memorizing the way the morning light touched my face. There was no pretense left, no distance, no careful phrasing. Just two people who had already crossed every line worth fearing. I used to think I'd forgotten what this felt like, she said quietly. To want someone. To be wanted back without apology. I sat beside her, close enough that our shoulders brushed. The touch was small, but it grounded us both. You make it sound like it's wrong. It's not wrong, she murmured. It's just complicated. I nodded, watching the steam rise from her cup. Then we'll take complicated. As long as it's real. Her laugh was soft, barely there. You're too young to talk like that. Maybe, I said. But you're the one who taught me how to mean it. The quiet stretched again, but this time, it was gentle. I reached out, fingers brushing hers. She didn't pull away. Her hand turned, slow and certain, until our fingers intertwined. Her skin was warm, steady. We sat like that for a while, two people who had finally stopped running from what they already knew. "I'm not sure where this goes," she said. "Neither am I," I admitted. "But maybe that's okay." She leaned her head against my shoulder, a long sigh escaping her. "You're going to ruin my calm." "Maybe you needed that," I said with a small smile. Her response was a quiet hum, her thumb tracing circles against the back of my hand. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, and the sound of the world returning felt almost like forgiveness. After a long silence, she tilted her head up and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead, not rushed, not desperate. Just certain. The kind that said, "We're not pretending anymore." I closed my eyes, letting that moment settle between us, fragile, human, and true. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. "You know, you never really lose your balance." I smiled faintly. "No?" She shook her head. "You just find a new way to stand." And in that quiet room, with her hand still in mine, I realized that was exactly what we were doing, standing, finally, on something real. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?